Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot into the ancient city of Ur, where the air smells like dust, roasted goat, and a little too much barley beer. It's somewhere around 3000 BCE, and the streets are buzzing, figuratively and literally. Flies circle clay food bowls, people shout in Akkadian, and vendors sell shiny fish and rough linen from stalls shaded with palm fronds. The sun's been baking the mud brick walls since dawn. And you're new here. You're sweaty, dusty, and your breath? Well, let's just say you'd knock over a zebu. That's right. Ancient Mesopotamia, land of ziggurats, cuneiform tablets, and surprisingly, tooth care. Because despite the heat, the dust, and the lack of plumbing, these people cared deeply about oral hygiene, or at least about not being the guy whose teeth looked like a crumbled pot shard. Your breath could offend a god, and your teeth, they'd better not look like the walls of a half-flooded granary. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you know. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing how far this sleepy little history journey travels. Now dim the lights, and let's start our journey together tonight. That's right. Ancient Mesopotamia, land of ziggurats, cuneiform tablets, and surprisingly, tooth care. Because despite the heat, the dust, and the lack of plumbing, these people cared deeply about oral hygiene, or at least about not being the guy whose teeth looked like a crumbled pot shard. Your breath could offend a god, and your teeth, they'd better not look like the walls of a half-flooded granary. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you know. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing how far this sleepy little history journey travels. Now dim the lights, and let's start our journey together tonight. You're standing in the middle of a bustling street. Behind you, a man is loudly arguing over a shipment of barley, and in front of you, a young girl is chewing on what looks like a short, twiggy branch. She's not alone. Others around her are too. This, dear traveler, is your first encounter with the ancient toothbrush. It's not plastic, and it certainly didn't come in minty flavors, but these fibrous sticks, cut from specific, often aromatic trees, served as the daily cleaning device for Mesopotamian mouths. You make your way into a shaded courtyard where a family is preparing for evening prayers. The father squats near a basin and methodically chews on a twig until it frays into soft fibers, like a tiny broom. He then scrubs his teeth with it, up, down, circular, and then a good spit into the dirt. You're handed one. It's dry, barky, and smells faintly like sweet sap. Not minty, not fresh, just earthy. Now here's the reality check. Even if you master the stick technique, you probably won't survive this century. Between infections, questionable water, and the general hazard of being alive in 3000 BCE, you're basically just trying not to be the smelliest corpse in the temple. But let's not rush toward your untimely death. Tonight is about the slow, dusty charm of ancient hygiene, about small rituals that grounded an entire civilization, about twigs, yes, actual tree twigs, that cleaned royal mouths, merchant mouths, and probably, reluctantly, priest mouths who had far too many dates for lunch. Historians still argue whether these oral hygiene habits were rooted in health awareness or spiritual cleansing. Was it about keeping the teeth in your head? Or was it about not offending your patron deity with last night's lentil stew? There's a thin layer of grime on your face from today's sun and wind. And your mouth tastes like the leather satchel you've been chewing on. A nearby woman offers you something bitter-smelling and hands you a small bundle of twigs tied with a bit of dyed string. It's her family's personal stash, some from willow trees, others from arak or fig branches. They've been carefully chosen, cut, and stored for this precise use. And guess what? Some of these twigs have antibacterial properties that modern science has confirmed. Go figure. You sit with the family, chewing gently, the fibers splitting and turning soft against your molars. It's strange at first, like trying to eat your toothbrush, but there's something meditative about it. It squeaks a little as you drag it across your teeth. You begin to notice how others around you are doing the same thing, part cleaning, part prayer, part habit. In a world without TikToks or toothpaste ads, the simple act of chewing a stick becomes a moment of quiet care. The fire crackles nearby, and someone starts playing a lyre. A child falls asleep beside a reed basket of onions, and you lean back against the mud brick wall, watching stars emerge between the hanging palm fronds above. The day ends not with brushing and flossing as you know it, but with twigs spitting and the gentle grind of sand between molars. Yes, sand. Because while the twig does a lot of the cleaning, many people also dip it in a gritty powder made from charred bone, salt, or pulverized herbs. But that's tomorrow's joy. Tonight, just sit with your stick, chew gently, and reflect on how much care this ancient world gave to the simple human task of not letting your mouth rot away before your 40th birthday. The girl who handed you the twig is now asleep, mouth slightly open, and you can still see the faint shine of clean teeth beneath the flickering firelight. You wake with a stiff back and a faint taste of bark still lingering on your tongue. A rooster, though it may actually be a disgruntled goose, screeches somewhere nearby. The morning heat is already rising like steam from the streets, and you shuffle toward a communal water basin to rinse your face. But just as you're splashing warmish water over your eyes, you notice it again. That unmistakable scratching sound. All around you, people are already cleaning their teeth. They're not in a hurry. There's no morning rush to beat the chariot traffic. Cleaning teeth here isn't a chore. It's part of a rhythm, like tying a headscarf or adjusting a belt. And the more you observe, the more you begin to realize something profound. In ancient Mesopotamia, teeth weren't just tools for chewing. They were little temples of status, health, and even spiritual purity. A merchant nearby flashes a grin as he barks out prices. His teeth, despite the endless dust and lack of toothbrushes, as you know them, are surprisingly intact. The trick, as you'll soon learn, wasn't just in the cleaning. It was in what those teeth represented. See, in Sumerian culture, cleanliness was next to godliness, but especially cleanliness of the mouth. Oral hygiene wasn't just about preventing rot. It was about purity. Rituals involved rinsing the mouth before prayer, cleaning the teeth before temple visits, and even symbolic acts like washing a god statue's mouth with oils and tools to maintain its sanctity. Historians still argue whether these daily rituals were born out of spiritual doctrine or if they emerged naturally from social norms. Did the priests command people to clean their mouths? Or did people just get tired of each other's onion breath? The connection between beauty and the mouth is written all over Sumerian poetry. One old clay tablet sings praises to a lover's mouth like polished lapis, and teeth bright as the first barley of spring. That's right, your molars were compared to agricultural metaphors, and that was a compliment. Even if your diet was mostly bread, beer, and whatever pickled vegetable hadn't gone bad yet, having presentable teeth meant you were disciplined. It meant you had the time, and maybe even the servants, to keep yourself in good shape. Oral care wasn't yet a specialized profession, but it was already a marker of class. A boy walks past chewing a stick that seems far too large for his mouth. He's grinning wide anyway. His mother scolds him gently and snaps the end off with a practiced flick. Then she rubs the broken tip against his teeth herself. It's a tender gesture, half discipline, half care, in a place where affection isn't often loud or poetic. Brushing someone else's teeth becomes oddly intimate. Over in the temple district, priests are preparing a morning ceremony. Before they chant, before they light incense, they perform purification rituals, and one of them includes cleaning their mouths. They use rinses made from water steeped with herbs, possibly cinnamon or licorice root, and sometimes even beer. That's right, beer as mouthwash. Historians still debate whether it was for medicinal reasons or just because beer was literally safer than the water. And then there are the statues, the gods themselves. High priests would clean the mouths of sacred statues daily in a ritual known as the opening of the mouth. This wasn't just symbolic. It was thought to give the statue the ability to eat the offerings presented to it. In essence, a god's image had to be clean enough to dine. You sit near a shrine and watch as one priest delicately wipes the lips of a statue with a cloth soaked in oils. He mutters incantations while rubbing tiny implements, maybe bronze, maybe gold, gently around the mouth. He finishes with what looks like a carved stick, eerily similar to the twig you used last night. A younger acolyte follows behind, polishing a set of ivory tools. Could they be early dental scrapers? Some archaeologists think so. Others believe they were symbolic, meant to mimic the tools used by humans to care for their own teeth. Either way, it suggests this culture saw a direct connection between divine purity and oral cleanliness. In your hand, the twig you pocketed the night before is now dry and brittle. You nibble the end again, remembering the careful pressure of scraping and the faint crackle of plaque giving way. It's a process that requires patience. You begin to appreciate how much time people dedicated to their teeth, not in hours, but in daily consistency. There's a joke being told nearby about a man who offered his bride 3 goats and 1 tooth. You don't quite get the punchline, but the others laugh politely. You imagine it's about value, or lack thereof. 1 tooth, after all, isn't much of a dowry. As the sun climbs higher, you notice more people squatting near shaded corners, working on their mouths with slow, practiced motions. It's not glamorous, but it's persistent. And in a world where gods walk among clay idols, and the difference between life and death is a dirty cut on your foot, taking care of your mouth is one of the few rituals you can actually control. And if your teeth do start to go, well, you've got a priest, a stick, and maybe a chant or two. but we'll get to the darker parts of Mesopotamian dental care soon enough. For now, just be glad your gums aren't bleeding yet. The girl from last night passes by, flashing you a quick grin. Her teeth really do shine in the morning light, like barley of spring if you're feeling poetic. Your feet crunch over pebbled clay as you wander further through the winding alleys of past traders arranging fish on reed mats and clay-baked bakers flapping dust off loaves. The scent of sesame oil drifts by, chased swiftly by the not-so-sweet aroma of unwashed sheep. Life here is noisy, messy, beautiful, and you're starting to realize, surprisingly, oral. You pause by a low stone wall where two older men sit in the shade, each working a twig between his molars with all the concentration of a scribe copying cuneiform. One of them notices your gaze and waves you over. He taps a spot next to him, offering you not just a seat, but a social moment. Because oral hygiene, like most things in Mesopotamia, is as much about community as it is about health. You settle in as the men share their tools. Their twigs are no ordinary scraps. They're fresh, carefully chosen slivers from the Salvadora persica tree, known in some circles today as the toothbrush tree. The sap, they explain, numbs the gums slightly, and the fibers fan out into a kind of bristle when chewed. It's not exactly minty fresh, but it's gentle, efficient, and oddly pleasant. Your mouth should feel like a priest's sandals. One man mutters cryptically. The other nods solemnly, as though this metaphor makes perfect sense. Historians still argue whether these twigs were chosen purely for their properties, or whether their use was passed down from early folk knowledge that blurred the line between medicine and ritual. Was it trial and error, or a divine gift whispered into someone's ear during a temple dream? As you chew the end of your own twig again, you start to feel the tiny bristles separating, softening, sweeping. The act slows your breath. There's a rhythm to it, almost meditative. Chew, twist, scrape, chew, twist, scrape. It's a morning liturgy in its own right. The old men take turns spitting discreetly into the dust, then inspecting each other's teeth with quiet dignity. It's less like a health check and more like gardeners admiring the buds on spring vines. You can't help but laugh, softly, as one of them compliments the other. Still got 9. Better than my ox. These interactions aren't just quaint, they're functional. Oral care isn't privatized here. If your gums start bleeding, your neighbor will notice. If you've got a chunk of date stuck in your incisor, someone might hand you a sharpened bone pick. Yes, you heard right. Bone. In a small home nearby, a mother is sharpening what looks like a tiny spatula on a smooth piece of obsidian. It's a dental tool, passed down from her own grandmother, used to gently scoop out bits of food stuck in her children's teeth. It looks a bit menacing to you, but the toddler she's working on is giggling, more tickled than terrorized. Bone and wood picks were common. They were often smoothed, shaped, and even carved with symbols to indicate ownership or maybe invoke protection. Some were made from animal teeth themselves, a molar, helping a molar. Kind of poetic, if you think about it. You're invited to try one, and despite the sharp-looking point, it slides between your teeth with surprising grace. There's a satisfying pop as it frees a stubborn bit of fig skin. A small victory. Around the corner, a vendor is selling bundles of dental sticks tied with dyed string. They're sorted by type. Some for whitening, some for healing sores, and some just because they smell nice. You pick up a bundle wrapped in linen and scented faintly with cardamom. The vendor grins and says it's for lovers. You're not entirely sure if he means breath freshening or romantic ritual, but you hand over a handful of barley grains and decide not to ask. Chewing sticks weren't just about scrubbing. They delivered natural chemicals, antiseptics, anti-inflammatories, breath fresheners, straight to the gums. Modern science has backed this up, actually. But in your current state, lounging in the shade while gently abrading your molars, you're less interested in peer-reviewed studies and more in the gentle crackle of sand beneath your toes. Back at the communal oven, a young woman is singing a lullaby while teasing her toddler's teeth with a flat reed. It looks like she's playing, but you realize she's actually brushing. The child swats her hand away, then grabs the reed and tries it himself, giggling through the process. Oral care begins young here, not with lectures, but mimicry. Some archaeologists speculate that households even had a dedicated jar for used tooth twigs, a kind of proto-trash bin for oral hygiene. Others think twigs were tossed into fires after use, their fragrant sap adding a faint aroma to the cooking bread. Either way, nothing was wasted for long. You think back to modern plastic toothbrushes, those rigid things that turn fuzzy over time and never fully dry. There's something better, you decide, about a tool that's part of the land, used and discarded without guilt. Someone sneezes behind you, and a passing scribe mutters something about bad spirits entering through the mouth. Apparently, the Sumerians believed that illness, particularly toothaches and gum diseases, were often caused by invisible demons that nested in unclean mouths. A dirty mouth wasn't just impolite, it was a cosmic liability. This fear of mouth spirits led to prayers inscribed on clay tablets, requesting divine help for sore jaws, aching molars, and even toothworms. Yes, toothworms. A widely accepted idea back then was that tiny creatures lived in your teeth, burrowing in and causing pain. The worm cried for beer, one poem reads, lamenting the pest's thirst. Historians still chuckle over that one. Was it metaphor or misunderstood decay? Regardless, tooth care was one of the few weapons you had against the invisible world. You could rinse, you could chew, you could pray, and if all else failed, you could hope the gods liked the smell of your breath. You're lounging now, propped against a wall of sun-baked bricks, chewing contentedly on your well-softened twig. Around you, daily life flows like the Euphrates, steadily, predictably, yet always with a surprise ripple here and there. But what happens when that soothing chew, twist, scrape isn't enough? What if a rogue fig seed lodges deep? What if one of your 9 remaining teeth decides to turn on you? It's time to talk Mesopotamian dental intervention. A young boy stumbles past you, howling, clutching his jaw. He's not being chased. He's suffering from the universal nightmare. A toothache. You wince in sympathy. Pain, after all, doesn't change much across millennia. His mother sweeps in from a doorway, a small pouch swinging at her waist. She pulls out what looks like, wait, is that moldy bread? Yes. Yes, it is, pressed into a paste with crushed garlic and wrapped in goat wool. This ancient poultice is part painkiller, part placebo, part maternal desperation. She applies it directly to the gum while softly humming a lullaby to distract him. You watch the ritual unfold, oddly touched. It's part medicine, part magic. No dentists in white coats here. Only mothers, priests, and herbalists doing their best to outwit angry molars. A few alleys down, you spot a different scene, a more theatrical approach. A man, bent in pain, sits before a woman adorned in copper bangles and smelling strongly of cedar. She waves burning incense near his face while chanting in Sumerian. Then she lifts a carved bone pick and prods his tooth gently, whispering what you suspect are not dental terms, but incantations. Historians still argue whether these healers, part midwife, part mystic, actually performed extractions or just acted as comforting figures, there's evidence scraped into old tablets that suggests both. One ancient record lists the fee for a tooth loosening, 5 shekels of silver. Pricey. Others describe tooth spirits being lured out with honey and bribed with offerings. You picture a mischievous little worm goblin wobbling out of someone's mouth, pawing at a honey pot. It's a ridiculous image, but somehow it helps. And yes, the idea of toothworms wasn't metaphorical. Clay tablets, some dating back over 3,000 years, contain detailed medical texts describing how toothaches are caused by these invaders. One reads like a short story. The toothworm descends into the tooth and refuses to leave, demanding beer and figs. The solution? Trick it with spells, drown it with potions, or, if all else fails, evict it with sharp tools and a steady hand. Of course, you're not entirely convinced. Any Mesopotamian enjoyed the steady hand part. You peek into a workshop where copper tools gleam in the half-light. Not surgical by modern standards, but sharp. Hooks, scrapers, probes. Some were likely used for oral procedures, scraping away decay or nudging loose a rotten incisor. The idea makes your jaw ache sympathetically. Still, you're impressed. No anesthesia, no floss, no soft lighting with calming music. Just herbal pastes, ritual chants, and, if it came to it, grit. The lines between medicine and magic were beautifully blurred. There's a famous Akkadian spell you recall hearing in a previous dreamlike stroll. Be gone, tooth pain, born of the mountains, bed by the rivers. It's oddly poetic. Pain, personified as a traveler, being sent back to where it came from. Modern scholars debate the effectiveness of these treatments. Some point to the surprising health of surviving skeletons, low rates of severe decay in early Mesopotamian remains. Others argue that by the time decay was obvious, the tooth was already past saving. Who's right? Historians still argue whether what we're seeing is prevention or just a lack of sugary diets. You stop by a stall selling small jars of resin. The vendor, beaming, tells you it's pine sap mixed with charcoal, a kind of early toothpaste substitute, rubbed into the gums for freshness and healing. He insists it keeps away demons. You nod politely. Honestly, after chewing on twigs all day, you're open to anything. One curious fact. Some early texts mention rinsing with wine or vinegar. You imagine the sting of vinegar on an open cavity and shudder. Effective, perhaps, but certainly not cozy. Nearby, a woman is pounding ingredients in a clay bowl. Myrrh, ash, salt, a splash of river water. She dips a reed into the gritty mixture and brushes her teeth with the precision of a painter working on a temple mural. Her daughter mimics her with perfect imitation. Half play, half tradition. You start to realize that Mesopotamian dental care wasn't just reactionary, it was preventative, regular, ritualistic, part of the rhythm of life, just like washing hands before meals or offering bread to the gods. And there's social accountability, too. In a world of face-to-face trade, conversation, and communal meals, bad breath wasn't just a personal issue. It was a social offense. People cared about how they presented their mouths, not just how they functioned. A priest walks by, his lips stained faintly from a herbal rinse, perhaps some form of antiseptic tea. He's chewing a twig with slow, deliberate motions, as though each chew counts as a prayer. You follow the sound of singing to a courtyard where a group of elderly women sit weaving baskets and sharing remedies. One swears by walnut bark. Another says burnt date pits are the best cure for gum pain. A third offers you a pinch of powdered clay and tells you it feeds the jaw spirits. Is any of it proven? Hard to say. But in this world, where healing is as much about belief as biology, the results are real enough. You lean back, chew your twig, and let the sun warm your toes. For a civilization without dentists, Mesopotamians had created a surprisingly rich, if slightly strange, oral care system. It wasn't sterile, but it was intimate, personal, human. And you can't help but think, maybe we haven't come that far after all. The sun is starting to dip low over the rooftops of Ur, casting long shadows that turn alleyways into little mazes of gold and ash. You're still on your twig. Yes, the same one. And its fibers are now so soft they resemble a paintbrush more than a dental tool. Your jaw is tired, but your teeth feel strangely clean. The Mesopotamians might be on to something. You wander further into the city, where the air smells of roasted onions and damp clay. You're looking for something specific now. Not another healer, or a priest, or even another twig stand. You want to know how Mesopotamians kept their mouths fresh after all those spiced stews and honey-drenched cakes. And you're in luck. A young woman, draped in linen, sits beside a fountain, carefully tying bundles of herbs with reed string. She notices your interest and gestures for you to sit. She plucks a sprig from one of the bundles and offers it to you. It's mint. Not the modern supermarket kind, but its ancient cousin, earthier, slightly bitter, with a nose-tingling sharpness that surprises you. You chew. It's not bad. Your mouth tingles, and your breath, you suspect, no longer smells like fermented barley. Yes, today's topic, breath fresheners. Most people think Ancient civilizations ignored such delicate matters. But Mesopotamians, living in such close, chatty quarters, were surprisingly attuned to oral aroma. They didn't just brush their teeth, they perfumed their mouths. Sitting with the herb seller, you learn about her little bundles: mint, aniseed, fennel, and even coriander. She explains, in a sing-song cadence, that chewing these herbs wasn't just about smell, it was also about status. A mouth that smelled like crushed fennel implied cleanliness, good health, and even divine favor. Some temples even encouraged priests to rinse with perfumed water before rituals. Imagine standing before a god statue in a crowded ziggurat, your breath reeking of garlic stew. You wouldn't dare. Sacred breath needed to smell sacred too. Historians still argue whether these rinses were ritual obligations or genuine attempts at hygiene. But either way, they were consistent. Stone basins have been found near temple entrances, possibly used for rinsing before and after sacrifices. You spot a few children mimicking the ritual in the street, giggling as they gargle with spiced water from a shared jar and spit dramatically into the dust. Nearby, a perfumer is crushing frankincense. He tells you, between exaggerated sniffs, that some nobles chewed little pebbles soaked in myrrh oil. You wonder how many teeth that broke before it caught on. Further down, a scribe is documenting recipes for mouth-sweetening pastes. On his tablet, dried pomegranate skin, crushed dates, and a mysterious ingredient translated as sunburnt honey. You squint at the symbols, wondering if that's poetic license or literal cooking advice. Mesopotamian writing was often flexible. One charming fact: clay tablets from as early as 2200 BCE mention pleasant mouth powders, suggesting that these weren't just medicinal concoctions. They were genuinely enjoyed. Some even seemed to come with scents or flavors. Pine ash, when mixed with tamarind, gave a cooling sensation, while powdered barley, blended with juniper, had a warming, smoky finish, like an ancient breath mint with attitude. And let's not forget the role of beer. Yes, beer. You may raise an eyebrow, but rinsing your mouth with warm beer was considered a form of purification, both physically and spiritually. It's unclear if it worked, but you imagine it made temple ceremonies a bit more cheerful. You follow a path toward the outer market, where traders from Elam and the Indus Valley are setting up for the evening. One merchant has a tiny bowl of strange black seeds, clove-like, but unfamiliar. He crushes one and motions for you to sniff. It's sharp, peppery, and oddly medicinal. He tells you these seeds are imported, expensive, and prized for making lovers more agreeable. You smirk. Ancient mouthwash as romance prep. Historians still argue whether these imports were used daily or reserved for special occasions. Some suggest that weddings, feasts, or even court hearings required one to sweeten the tongue, both literally and metaphorically. A priest in passing mutters an old saying, "The gods favor the fragrant mouth." You're not sure if that's doctrine or marketing, but it's effective either way. You spot a teenager rubbing his teeth with a greenish paste. He grins, showing surprisingly clean teeth, and tells you it's a mix of ash and fig leaves. His uncle makes it at home, sells it by the handful. You try a bit. It's gritty, herbal, but not unpleasant. As the sun dips further, the smells of the city shift. Less bread and sun-warmed clay, more charcoal, animal fat, and river mist. It reminds you of modern cities in some ways. Every street with its own scent, every scent telling a different story. Back at the fountain, the herb woman is packing up. She hands you a small pouch, a gift. Inside, 3 bundles of mint, a pinch of coriander seed, and a rolled leaf that smells faintly of cinnamon. "For your night breath," she says, smiling. You tuck it into your robe pocket and thank her. It's not just a souvenir. It's a reminder. Mesopotamians weren't primitive. They were practical, courteous, maybe even a little vain. They lived in a time without the toothpaste tubes or plastic flossers. But they found ways to keep their mouths fresh, fragrant, and feast-ready. Some of it was science. Some of it was ritual. Most of it was habit passed from grandmother to grandchild through generations of mouths, chewing, spitting, rinsing, breathing. And now, so are you. The pouch of mint and coriander swings gently from your sash as you turn toward the riverbanks, where the air grows wetter and heavier, and the breeze carries the hum of reeds and gossip. You're following a scent trail now, less deliberate than before, more instinctual, something smoky, something sharp. You're about to stumble into the strangest chapter of Mesopotamian dental care yet, the world of ash-based pastes. You reach a cluster of mud brick homes where older women squat in semicircles around little pottery braziers. Their fingers are blackened, not from dirt, but from something they call tooth ash. They smile, wide, toothy, and undeniably confident. One beckons you over and waves a clay jar beneath your nose. It smells alarming, like burned straw mixed with something earthy. She dips a wooden spatula into it and scoops out a gritty, damp paste. With no warning, she dabs a bit on your gums. Your eyes water. It tingles, then stings, then settles into something strangely fresh, like bitter mint crossed with charcoal. You suck in air through your teeth, and the old woman laughs until her sides shake. This, she tells you, is a family recipe. Burnt barley husks, crushed acacia bark, and a dash of river salt. Cleans the spirit, too, she adds with a wink. Burnt substances, especially plant materials, were a cornerstone of Mesopotamian medicine and hygiene. Ash was believed to be both purifying and preservative. The idea was simple: burn away the rot, clean with what remains. This extended to mouth care. Charcoal-like powders were rubbed directly onto teeth, sometimes with fingers, sometimes with twigs. Historians still argue whether these ash mixtures were more medicinal or symbolic. Were they meant to kill bacteria or to chase away the evil spirits believed to cause toothache? Probably both. That's the Mesopotamian way, physical and spiritual, always braided tightly together. One tablet found in the city of Nippur details a toothache remedy that involves a poultice of burnt goat horn and honey, to be applied to the sore place and sung over with a calming spell. You imagine the burning, the buzzing, the chanting. Not quite your average dentist visit. As you watch the women work, you notice the different ash colors. Some are dark black, others ashy gray, and one looks almost white. You ask about the difference. One woman leans in conspiratorially and whispers, "White ash is from palm bark. For weddings. Makes teeth bright like the moon." You can't tell if that's a metaphor or an ancient marketing line, but it's compelling. Tooth whitening was apparently a known concept, even if the methods seem severe. One tale describes a merchant who chewed limestone powder every morning for whiter teeth. Another, less lucky soul, reportedly cracked a molar doing the same. You decide not to follow that trend. You take a seat beside the group and watch as they prepare more paste. They grind herbs on a flat basalt slab, adding oil drop by drop. The sound is hypnotic. Scrape, scrape, drip. You drift into thought. Someone passes around a bowl of warm water infused with fig bark and honey. You sip cautiously. It's meant to soothe the gum spirits, they say. Whether those are literal spirits or poetic inflammation, no one clarifies. Still, your gums feel calmer. There's a rhythm here, a calm. These women have been doing this for decades, possibly generations. One woman, easily in her 70s, claims her grandmother used the same paste and died with all her teeth. You glance at her own grin. She might be telling the truth. One little boy, barely old enough to walk, sits cross-legged, dutifully brushing with a twig dipped in the black paste. His mother reminds him to circle, not scrub. Some dental advice truly is eternal. You also learn that not all ash was equal. Animal bone ash was considered powerful, but risky. It could stain the teeth, or worse, cause dreams of jackals. Whether that's chemical or mythological fallout is unclear. But you jot down a mental note. Stick to plant ash. The mixture you tried earlier seems to be working. Your teeth feel cleaner, smoother. Your tongue flicks across them absent-mindedly, as though rediscovering an old surface. It's oddly satisfying. A man with soot on his forehead stops by, inspecting the jars. He's a traveling apothecary, collecting recipes and selling his own ash blends, some mixed with sesame oil, others with fermented barley water. You ask what his most popular item is. He points to a tiny pouch filled with red powder. Crushed brick and fig sap, he says, for tooth strength, or so they say. You don't ask who they are. This isn't the place for fact-checking. As the sun slips into the river, turning it molten orange, you realize the value of this practice. It's not just about hygiene. It's about community, ritual, wisdom passed hand to hand, mouth to mouth. You look down at the small smudge of paste still on your fingertips and think, this might have been the closest thing to a toothbrush ad in 2000 BCE. Not glamorous, not glossy, but real. And now, as darkness blankets the city and the herb smoke rises gently toward the stars, you wonder if, centuries from now, someone will be brushing their teeth with paste and thinking of us, our trends, our tools, our rituals. Maybe every generation has its own form of ash. You wake early, not because you have to, but because the smell of sesame oil warming over fire is just too pleasant to ignore. Your jaw feels oddly refreshed. The ash paste from last night has left your teeth smooth, almost polished, and you're ready for the next step in your ancient Mesopotamian dental journey. You shuffle out into the early light. The streets are quiet, except for a boy herding geese and the rhythmic splashes of someone rinsing pots by the canal. You follow the scent of oil and the soft humming of a tune sung in a language older than time. It leads you to a workshop, part apothecary, part kitchen. Inside, a man is grinding something with the intense focus of a priest. You peer over his shoulder, to find a pile of crushed fennel seeds, dried date skins, and a shiny copper bowl filled with pale golden oil. Tooth oil, he explains without looking up, made fresh each moon. Sesame oil, light, nutty, antibacterial, is the hidden hero of Mesopotamian oral care. You dip a finger in and taste it. Sweet, earthy, strangely soothing. The man explains that it's swirled in the mouth, not swallowed. For cleansing. Also, for gossip, he adds with a wink. Apparently, it loosens more than plaque. Oil pulling, as modern wellness influencers would call it, wasn't invented on Instagram. It was likely born right here, somewhere along the Euphrates. While there's no surviving cuneiform tablet labeled 10-day detox for brighter teeth, the oral use of sesame oil is referenced in multiple healing rituals. Historians still argue whether this practice was primarily hygienic or mystical. Was the oil meant to pull out spiritual impurities, like envy or deceit, or just dislodge yesterday's lentil stew? In Mesopotamia, there's rarely a clean line between science and sorcery. The man hands you a reed straw and a bowl of warm sesame oil mixed with thyme. You swirl it in your mouth. At first, it's like gargling salad dressing, but soon it becomes strangely meditative. The warmth, the silence, the slight pop and fizz of herbs. This is oil pulling, 2000 BCE edition. After a while, he gestures for you to spit into a clay pot. You do, and he nods approvingly. Not too early for oil, he says, tapping your chin. He shows you the shelf of infused oils, some with mint, others with crushed garlic. For illness, he says. Also good for mother-in-laws. You try not to laugh, but fail. There's one with crushed pearls in it. For royalty, he says, or people who think they are. Again, you fail to contain yourself. You wander to another corner of the shop, where a slab of obsidian holds what looks like a small set of tools. Wooden picks, bronze needles, even a fine threaded linen cloth. Here, it seems, is where oil meets action. After oil pulling, many Mesopotamians used wooden picks, shaped from tamarisk or willow, to scrape debris from between their teeth. Some even twisted linen thread and ran it along the gums. A primitive, yet surprisingly effective form of flossing. One tablet mentions the 3 tools of the clean mouth, interpreted by some scholars to mean twig, thread, and oil. Others argue it may refer to amulets or prayer items. But standing here, looking at this ancient floss, you start to believe the practical interpretation. You give the floss a go. It's thicker than modern thread, but soft, soaked in rosewater. You loop it around your fingers and tug it gently between your molars. It feels nostalgic? Or maybe that's just the oil still coating your gums, giving everything a hazy, pleasant buzz. The shopkeeper offers you a finishing touch, a pinch of powdered myrrh to press against your teeth. It tastes like Christmas and tree bark, but also kind of regal. "Royal gums," he says, straight-faced. You're not sure whether to believe him. Tooth oils were sometimes reserved for special occasions, festivals, weddings, or diplomatic dinners. Having fragrant breath was not only pleasant, it was political. Imagine negotiating grain prices with a king while breathing garlic fumes. No, thank you. You step outside with a mouth that feels smoother than silk cloth and a new respect for ancient dental layering. Scrape, swish, floss, and scent. You're basically a Mesopotamian influencer at this point. Later, you overhear a debate between two elders in the courtyard. One swears by honey mixed with sesame oil. The other insists on olive oil boiled with mustard seeds. A third chimes in, claiming the real secret is camel milk followed by sesame rinse. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian oil practices were standardized or regional. Did everyone agree on sesame? Or did city-states like Ur and Akkad have their own dental terroir? Whatever the truth, one thing's clear. Oil wasn't just for cooking. It was for charm, health, and maybe even romance. One myth tells of a goddess who lured her lover with lips fragrant with the oil of the dawn. You wonder what that smelled like. Probably thyme and sesame, maybe rose. As the heat of the day begins to rise, the shopkeeper packs you a little vial, sesame oil with a sliver of cinnamon bark. Use at sunset, he says. If your dreams are too loud, you tuck it into your satchel, teeth gleaming like a moonlit ziggurat, and make your way back to the river, ready to see what other wonders this civilization has in store for your ever-evolving Mesopotamian smile. The river winds ahead, slow and lazy, carrying with it the hum of life along its banks. You trail your fingers in the water as you walk, the scent of sesame still faint on your breath. Around you, the city wakes, vendors unrolling reed mats, oxen snorting as they're led to market, children chasing each other with balls of palm fiber. You pause near a small shrine built to Ninkarak, the goddess of healing. A woman is kneeling there, offering honey cakes and a handful of mint. Beside her, an older man presses a cloth to his jaw, wincing. A sore tooth? Perhaps. You approach quietly, ears perked. This, you soon learn, is where things get a little more magical. While most oral hygiene practices in Mesopotamia were tactile, scraping, rinsing, oiling, some took a distinctly supernatural turn. If your tooth still ached after days of twig cleaning and sesame swirling, it was time to consider a different cause. The tooth worm. Yes, the infamous Mesopotamian tooth worm, the tiny, invisible beast believed to burrow into molars and feast on their pulp like a bored teenager eating through a loaf of bread. One ancient incantation reads, "After Anu created the heavens, the tooth worm came crawling, saying, 'Feed me.'" You can almost hear it in a grumbly little cartoon voice. Historians still argue whether this idea was purely metaphor or deeply believed. But clay tablets suggest the toothworm was taken quite seriously. Remedies weren't just physical, they involved ritual, fire, and the occasional shouted command. A priest arrives. His robes are dusted with ash, and his eyes carry the sleepy intensity of someone who's performed this rite 1,000 times before breakfast. He takes out a thin piece of copper wire, curls it into a spiral, and waves it gently over the man's jaw. Chanting follows, low, rhythmic, strangely comforting. Then the priest hands the man a mixture of beer and vinegar, instructing him to swish and spit into the fire. The flames flare slightly. "The worm recoils," he says solemnly. You're pretty sure the worm isn't real, but still, your jaw tingles in sympathy. A less theatrical but equally odd remedy comes from a scribe's collection of useful verses for affliction of the mouth. It includes a suggestion to press mashed figs and onions against the cheek while reciting the names of 7 gods in reverse. You're not sure if the pain is supposed to go away or just get confused and leave. You sit beside a young apprentice healer who's grinding cinnamon bark into a clay mortar. She explains that some treatments included cedar oil drops applied directly to the gums, or even steam inhalation of boiled mint and vinegar. One text describes gargling with beer left under the stars for 3 nights. Another insists that humming the hymn of Enki while chewing licorice root will drive away the ache through the ear. You chuckle. Ancient Mesopotamia, home of both experimental dentistry and deluxe spa day. There's also the option of seeking out a baru, a diviner, who may determine that your aching molar is not caused by bacteria or worms, but by social sin. Spoke harshly to your mother? Ate barley meant for the gods? Tooth pain could be your karmic invoice. You pass a street stall, where tiny copper rods, some curved, some hooked, are laid out like dental instruments. Their merchant claims they can be heated and applied to trick the worm into fleeing. You decide not to ask what happens if the worm stands its ground. A few steps later, you find yourself at a house made of reddish brick, its walls lined with drying herbs. A midwife is inside, tending to a young girl. She dabs clove oil, yes, actual clove, crushed and soaked in goat fat, onto the girl's gums. The smell is sharp, but pleasant. Clove, it turns out, isn't just a modern remedy. Its analgesic properties were known even then, especially in Assyrian medicine. But some scholars suggest that its use wasn't widespread due to the difficulty of trade. Only temples or noble homes might have clove from distant lands. Hold it between your teeth, the midwife tells the girl. Bite gently, like holding a secret. You're charmed and possibly inspired to add clove oil to your modern routine. Mesopotamian tooth care is beginning to feel surprisingly advanced, minus the worm, of course. Still, the fear of the tooth worm was persistent. Even in cultures far beyond Mesopotamia, this myth endured well into medieval times. Some scholars argue that it spread via oral tradition, the way ghost stories or recipes do. Others think it emerged independently in different places, like the world's first dental conspiracy theory. You notice a group of children gathered around an elder who's drawing a giant worm in the dust with a stick. He adds teeth to the worm. The kids squeal in delight and terror. "This is why we brush," he says with a grin. You suspect this is the Mesopotamian equivalent of telling kids to floss, or the worms will get them. And honestly, it's effective. As the day wears on, you reflect on how healing in Mesopotamia was never just one thing. It was physical, magical, spiritual, and deeply communal. You didn't go to a dentist. You went to your neighborhood healer, your temple, your grandmother with her steaming mint pot. You chanted. You swished. You bribed the gods with honey. You pass another shrine to Ninkarak. A tiny clay tablet rests at its base. On it, a tooth etched carefully with a worm curled around it. A protective symbol? A warning? You leave a pinch of sesame beside it, just in case. You wake to the sound of a goat sneezing nearby. Mesopotamian mornings are rarely quiet, but they're oddly soothing, like the background noise of a very ancient village podcast. You stretch under a reed awning and rub your eyes. Somewhere, someone's already pounding barley for beer, and the neighbors are shouting cheerfully about ducks escaping into the canal again. Your jaw feels fine, which is a relief, considering all the tooth worm business yesterday. Today, though, you've decided to investigate something less squirm-inducing: how Mesopotamians stored, transported, and manufactured the many little tools and substances they used for oral hygiene. You wander toward the city's craft district, where the air smells of clay, charcoal, and ambition. Potters are already at their wheels, shaping cups, bowls, and, interestingly, tiny narrow-necked vessels just big enough to hold a sprig of cleaning twig or a dollop of scented oil. You pause at one stall where a boy is arranging a neat row of terracotta jars, each sealed with a waxy stopper. His mother sees your interest and explains with a smile. Tooth pots, sesame oil here, myrrh paste there. This one? Mint for chewing. You pick up a jar, feel its cool weight in your palm. It's smooth, shaped to fit easily in one hand. This is no clumsy container. It's ergonomic, portable, pocketable. Mesopotamians, it seems, appreciated convenience. Mainstream scholars agree that these personal jars were common, especially among the middle and upper classes. They held everything from perfumed oils to grainy cleaning pastes. But historians still argue whether every household had them, or if they were more status symbols than everyday items. A kind of ancient branded toothbrush holder, if you will. You move on to the copper workers. A silversmith with a long, elegant beard beckons you over and displays a small, flat object that looks suspiciously like a spoon had a baby with a hook. He grins. "Tongue scraper," he says. You try not to look alarmed. The idea of tongue scraping is hardly new. It appears in both Mesopotamian and later Indian traditions. The tool in front of you is thin, flexible, and well used. You're told that some people made theirs from bronze, others from bone, or even polished hardwood. He offers you a try. You politely decline. It's too early in the morning for that kind of commitment. As you continue, you notice several traders unloading bundles of herbs, wrapped in linen and tied with clay tags. Licorice root, coriander seeds, crushed myrtle leaves, all ingredients listed in surviving medical texts. One seller boasts a special blend said to soothe the mouth and honor the gods. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. The gods have teeth, too. You're led into a small courtyard workshop where two women are mashing garlic and dried fig into a dark, sticky mass. Paste, one of them explains, pointing to her own teeth and miming a brush. My grandmother's recipe. You lean in. The smell is aggressive, but oddly reassuring. One tablet discovered in the ruins of Nippur includes a similar formula: crushed fig, salt, and vinegar, bound together in honey. It was likely stored in tight-lidded containers and applied with fingers, reeds, or twigs. One of the women hands you a stick of what looks like driftwood. "Soft tip," she says. "Chew. Good for mouth." You recognize it as a precursor to the modern miswak, still used in parts of the world today. Its fibers have been softened by gentle boiling and flavored with fennel seeds. You pop one end into your mouth, chew slowly, and feel the tip fray into fine threads. It's not bad. The texture is grassy, the taste clean and earthy. You glance around to see if you're doing it right. Nobody's laughing, so you carry on. Isa. You notice that some sticks are dyed. Purples and yellows, mainly. This, your guide tells you, was fashionable. Some even rubbed charcoal on the bristles for extra whitening, though others feared it might invite the spirit of fire into their mouths. Superstition and style, always a tricky blend. Storage, though, is where Mesopotamians truly shined. You peek into homes where clay jars are stacked with meticulous care. Some have images etched on the lids. One shows a smiling face with exaggerated teeth. Another bears the mark of Gula, the goddess of healing, a kind of divine stamp of approval. Further down the road, you discover a communal bathhouse. These weren't common everywhere, but in larger cities like Ur or Babylon, wealthier residents could visit public washing areas. A section of one bathhouse is lined with shelves holding shared grooming tools, scrapers, combs, and yes, even communal tooth-cleaning sticks. You hesitate at the idea of borrowing someone else's mouth twig, but you admire the logic. Rinse, scrape, oil, done. One worker points to a sign etched into the wall. It reads, roughly, "Clean mouth, clear thoughts." You imagine it in a fancy font on a bathroom wall today. You catch sight of a boy carrying a small reed pouch slung over his shoulder. It's his hygiene kit, complete with oil jar, a cleaning twig, a tongue scraper, and a woven cloth for wiping his face. His sister has one too. You're charmed. And here's a curious thing. Some Mesopotamians believed storing your hygiene tools with a fragment of obsidian would keep bad spirits away. Others preferred amulets shaped like open mouths. Both practices are documented, though scholars debate whether they were symbolic, medicinal, or just really good marketing. By late afternoon, you find yourself back by the river, watching as a woman rinses her child's mouth with warm salt water from a tiny carved jug. The child giggles, spits, and runs off to chew on a licorice twig. You lean against a sun-warmed wall and consider your own bathroom back home. Sure, you've got electric toothbrushes and fluoride and dental insurance, but there's something deeply human, deeply ancient in the quiet care these people take with their mouths. It's not about vanity. It's about health, ritual, and maybe even respect. As the sky turns amber and the air fills with the scent of roasting grain, you tuck the last of your twig into your belt. Tomorrow, you'll learn about prayers and potions for mouth blessings. But tonight, you'll sleep knowing your breath smells faintly of fennel and fig. You dream of sesame oil and mint, which is either oddly refreshing or deeply concerning, depending on how you interpret dreams. When you wake, the sun is already stretching long golden fingers across the city walls, and a chorus of frogs is winding down their night shift. You blink away the sleep and remember, today is for spiritual cleansing. Because while Mesopotamians were quite practical with their grooming tools, charcoal rubs, bristle twigs, and oil jars, they also saw the mouth as more than just a chewing instrument. It was a sacred gateway. Words came from it. Prayers came from it. Curses, too. So naturally, they developed rituals to protect and purify it. You join a group heading toward a modest temple courtyard, one of those everyday places where people whisper petitions and leave offerings in small baskets. A priestess, barefoot and serene, greets the crowd. She sprinkles water infused with lavender and cedar over your head, then hands out small pellets of something doughy. "This is for the tongue," she murmurs, "and the soul." You hesitate before placing it in your mouth. The texture is like salted bread dough left out in the sun. But as it dissolves, you sense a warm spice, perhaps cumin, perhaps something older. A soft chant begins, and you chew slowly as others hum along. According to some surviving tablets, certain temples offered these oral blessings during festivals or before significant prayers. They weren't medicine exactly, but spiritual mouth refreshers meant to align your words with truth and keep deceitful spirits away. Think of it as a divine breath mint with a moral compass. You move on to the shrine of Nabu, god of wisdom and writing. Here, worshippers press reed styluses to clay tablets, scribbling out their confessions or requests. One man carefully writes, "May my speech be clean, and my teeth not rot." A practical prayer, really. Near the altar, an older woman sells sayos, tiny votive figures, miniature heads with open mouths. They're not especially attractive, One looks like it's yawning, another like it just tasted sour pomegranate. You learn these were sometimes buried under doorways or kept in cupboards, thought to keep away illnesses that entered through the mouth. You buy one, mostly because the yawning one looks like your cousin. Back at the riverbank, you watch as a family gathers around a smoking bundle of herbs. This is a fumigation ritual. They pass a cup of sesame oil, swish it around their mouths, spit into a clay pot, and hold the smoking bundle near their faces while reciting an incantation. You catch the words ash shu, which might mean to drive out, or maybe to soften. Mesopotamian Akkadian is tricky that way. A passing elder leans toward you and chuckles. This is for those who speak too sharply. The smoke dulls the tongue like sand on a blade. You nod slowly, wondering how many politicians today could benefit from that sort of mouth ritual. One cuneiform tablet, badly cracked but still readable, describes a mouth-purifying spell to be recited before negotiations. It references gods of sweetness and teeth of ivory that do not bite lies. Scholars still argue whether this was meant metaphorically or if it was part of an actual hygiene routine for diplomats and scribes. You duck into a small apothecary tucked between two barley shops. Inside, it smells like 20 kinds of resin and 11 kinds of regret. A bearded man in a leather apron waves you over and points to a clay board scratched with symbols. He offers a paste he calls silent breath. It's made from dates, ashes of tamarisk bark, crushed pearls, and something that looks like powdered lizard tail. Protects the throat, he assures you. Sweetens your voice, keeps demons away. You lean in. Really? He shrugs. Maybe, but you'll smell like heaven. You try a pinch. It's gritty. Your tongue goes slightly numb. A customer behind you whispers, "That's the good stuff. They used it on singers and royal messengers." Whether that's true or the ancient equivalent of Yelp exaggeration, it's impossible to tell. But you like the idea of a singer prepping for performance with a mouthful of lizard-infused glamour paste. Outside again, you spot children drawing in the dirt. One of them is tracing a figure with a giant mouth surrounded by squiggly lines. "That's the mouth-eater," she says solemnly. "He eats bad words." Her mother frowns and adds, "Say thank you, or he'll nibble your lips off in your sleep." It's all a little unnerving, but you appreciate the cultural commitment to oral accountability. You spend the rest of the day listening to storytellers, many of whom start their performances with small rituals, spitting over their shoulders, chewing licorice, or tapping their tongues 3 times with a knuckle. All small acts meant to invite clarity, memory, and safety. A few mention Humbaba, the forest monster from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Supposedly, his breath could rot trees and silence birds. Some believed invoking his name kept your own breath from turning foul. Others thought it was a warning not to speak too much nonsense. As the sun begins its long descent, you return to your reed hut. There, you find an old woman sitting in the dust, humming as she rubs her gums with salt water and honey. She smiles at you, revealing surprisingly white teeth. "No spirits here," she says. "Only laughter and garlic." You smile back, sit beside her, and copy her movements. The water stings, but the honey smooths it out. You feel clean, not just tooth clean, but soul clean. And as dusk rolls in like a warm, clay-scented blanket, you realize something. For the Mesopotamians, dental hygiene wasn't just about survival or even vanity. It was reverent. Mouths mattered. They were sacred, dangerous, and full of power, which, honestly, is kind of beautiful. Morning arrives, dressed in a thick haze of wood smoke and apricot blossoms. You stretch, yawn, and, out of habit now, rub your teeth with a bit of palm fiber dipped in warm sesame oil. The taste is oddly comforting, like a breakfast you didn't know you missed. Today, your curiosity carries you to the kitchens and dining stalls, because if you're going to learn how Mesopotamians kept their teeth clean, you should understand what they were eating to dirty them in the first place. The streets are already bustling. A vendor flips lentil cakes on a clay griddle, and their aroma is enough to make you salivate. You wander past piles of dried dates, jars of honey, and strings of dried fish swaying like sleepy flags. Everything smells of earth, spice, and heat. Your first bite is a sticky date cake wrapped in fig leaves. Delicious? Yes. Tooth-friendly? Not even a little. Mesopotamian food, rich in starches and sugars, posed challenges for even the most diligent twig chewers. That's likely why their tooth-cleaning rituals were so regular and so creative. A local scribe tells you about chewing bread, a coarse, barely leavened loaf made with stone-ground flour and bits of abrasive ash. The gritty texture wasn't just tolerated, it was welcomed. Like edible sandpaper, it helped scrub the teeth during meals. You bite into a chunk and immediately feel it exfoliating your molars. Painfully effective. Historians still argue whether it was intentional, the scribe admits between chews. Some say the abrasiveness was a side effect of poor milling. Others believe they knew exactly what they were doing. You watch a young boy gnaw a bit of raw onion dipped in vinegar. Another folk habit believed to wake up the teeth. The vinegar burns slightly, but the boy grins, gaps, and all, seemingly proud of his pungent mouth. At a riverside table, a priest explains how certain foods were believed to have spiritual weight. Lentils made your tongue hum with truth. Pomegranate seeds cleansed the mouth of lies. And goat cheese, curiously, was seen as a silence bringer, perfect for meditative meals. You sample a paste made of crushed chickpeas, garlic, and sesame. The vendor boasts that it both nourishes the body and feeds the tongue's honesty. You nod politely, then drink an alarming amount of barley beer to drown the aftertaste. One surprisingly common habit: rinsing the mouth with warm beer. Not for intoxication, at least not primarily, but because its fermentation acted as a mild antiseptic. You try it and find it vaguely soothing. Warm, yeasty mouthwash, a bit like gargling soup. Nearby, a man slowly chews frankincense resin. He claims it hardens the gums, sweetens breath, and pleases the gods. You watch as the resin softens in his cheek like ancient chewing gum. He offers you a piece. It tastes like incense and citrus, and your jaw quickly tires. As you walk, you spot more examples of what might be called accidental hygiene. A woman crushes river snails for their purple dye and absent-mindedly wipes her stained fingers on a linen cloth she then uses to clean her teeth. The astringent chemicals in the dye, possibly tannins, may have helped kill bacteria, or they may have just dyed her gums purple. The results are inconclusive. You stop by a family home where the mother shows you a tool passed down for 3 generations. It's a flat piece of bone, worn smooth on one end, used to scrape the tongue. She demonstrates, carefully drawing it across her tongue, then rinsing it with salt water. "To remove bitterness," she says, smiling. You can't tell if she means physical or emotional bitterness. Probably both. The family invites you to lunch. The table is set with flat breads, pickled turnips, stewed beans, and something they call smile porridge, a barley mash spiced with cardamom and black cumin, thought to brighten the mood and freshen the mouth. During the meal, the youngest daughter asks if you've seen the tooth jar yet. The what? She leads you to a shelf and shows you a small clay pot filled with what look like tiny pebbles. "Lost teeth," she explains, "from the whole family. We keep them for luck." You try not to recoil. But to the Mesopotamians, this made perfect sense. Teeth were powerful. Losing one wasn't just a biological event, it was a spiritual shift. You didn't toss them away like melon rinds. You honored them. Another child pipes up. I buried mine under the fig tree. Now it grows sweeter fruit. The logic is fuzzy, but adorable. That evening, you visit a gathering at a healer's home. Over mugs of hot mint water, he explains that certain foods were thought to anchor the teeth. Roasted chickpeas, sesame paste, and dried figs were staples in what he calls mouth-strong meals. He hands you a small scroll with a scribbled recipe. Goat's milk, boiled with licorice root and thyme, cooled and swished nightly. For invincible teeth, it claims. You try a sip and nearly spit it out. It tastes like sour yogurt and cough syrup. But he's beaming. The flavor tells you it's working. You grin weakly and rinse your mouth with fresh water. Later, lying on your mat under the stars, you reflect on how diet and dental care were never separate here. Every meal was a ritual, every bite a decision. Even the textures of food, soft or sharp, oily or gritty, were weighed for their effect on your smile. It's a different kind of logic, one where chewing wasn't just mechanical. It was medicinal, spiritual, communal. And maybe, just maybe, you'll dream of sesame seeds again tonight. Hopefully, not in your molars this time. Tonight, your curiosity is drawn not by food or tools, but by ritual. Specifically, the quiet, strange ceremonies Mesopotamians performed to keep their mouths, yeah, even their teeth, pleasing to the gods. You begin the day walking through the courtyard of a temple, the rising sun warming the ancient brick beneath your feet. Priests in linen robes move silently around you, sweeping the floor with bundles of reeds. You're not here for a grand sacrifice or royal decree. No, today you've come for something far more mundane and somehow more mysterious. A tooth-cleaning prayer. Yes, really. One priest beckons you toward a shaded corner. A group of initiates are gathered in a circle, gently humming, their mouths filled with what looks like foam. They're not rabid. They're gargling a concoction of warm beer and ground cloves. A ritual mouth rinse used during purification ceremonies. You hesitate. Then you sip, swish, and promptly sputter. It tastes like someone soaked cinnamon sticks in bath water. A gentle hand pats your back. It gets better, the priest says with a knowing smile. By the third mouthful, your tongue begins to speak more kindly. Is it true? Maybe. Is it likely? Possibly not. Historians still argue whether rituals like these were primarily spiritual, or if they just piggybacked off ancient hygiene practices. The line between clean and pure was very blurry in Mesopotamia. You watch as one initiate gently presses a finger to their gums, murmuring an incantation to Nabu, the god of wisdom. Another crushes a small herb, possibly myrtle, and rubs it along her teeth while reciting what sounds like a lullaby. The priest explains, "We clean the mouth before we speak to the gods. If we use dirty teeth, we might bring dirty thoughts." You nod solemnly, hiding your modern impulse to laugh. Later, in the market, you speak with an older woman who calls herself a mouth seer. She doesn't predict futures, she claims, just moods. By examining your teeth, she can tell whether your spirit is calm or stormy. She peers into your mouth with all the gravity of a doctor diagnosing a plague. Slight staining. You hold too many worries on your tongue. You nod politely, wondering if this is an ancient Mesopotamian way of telling someone they talk too much. Her remedy? Sleep with a clove under your tongue. Dream of silence. You try it that night. The clove is bitter, pokes your cheek, and you wake up convinced your tongue is numb. Still, it's hard not to admire the dedication. As you wander deeper into the city's back alleys, you find a small shrine carved into a wall. The offering bowls are filled not with coins or incense, but with teeth. Milk teeth, mostly, polished smooth by years of ritual touching. You learn from a nearby merchant that when a child lost a tooth, they didn't toss it. They offered it to one of the underworld gods, probably Nergal or Ereshkigal, with a whispered promise, "Take this piece of me so the rest stays strong." It's oddly poetic. You ask if adults ever did the same. "Only when they were desperate," the merchant replies. "A lost molar was like losing a piece of your soul. Some begged the gods to accept it as a trade." At sunset, you find yourself at a modest household where a mother is preparing her daughter for a coming-of-age ceremony. As part of the ritual, the girl must chew a twig of fig wood while her family chants a blessing. The mother says the fig tree grows toward the heavens, and its wood carries divine sweetness. The daughter chews solemnly, then spits into a clay bowl. Her father mixes the spit with crushed salt and buries it in the garden. "For new roots," he explains. It's hard to tell if this is a long-standing tradition or something this family invented. But in Mesopotamia, oral rituals were often family matters, less about universal dogma, more about what felt sacred to you. You begin noticing symbols tied to teeth everywhere. Amulets carved in the shape of smiling mouths, small stones etched with glyphs meaning "speak wisely." Even a necklace made entirely of tiny, worn toothpicks, each once used by an ancestor. One tablet you're shown includes a rather poetic verse. The tongue speaks what the tooth protects. The tooth falls, the truth spills. Some scholars believe this was part of a longer cleansing hymn. Others think it was just an expensive dental advertisement. Either way, it sticks with you. As you return to your sleeping mat under the night sky, you can't help but reflect on how differently these people thought about their mouths. To them, teeth weren't just for chewing. They were moral anchors, divine instruments, and deeply personal symbols. In Mesopotamia, cleaning your teeth wasn't a hygiene task. It was a quiet promise to speak better, to be better. And maybe, just maybe, it's a promise worth making now and then. Dawn settles like dust over the city's rooftops, and you stretch, still thinking about fig twigs and salty spit rituals. But today, your guide waves you toward a quieter corner of Mesopotamian life, one that history tends to forget: the personal routines of women. Specifically, how they maintained dental hygiene in the privacy of their homes and courtyards. You follow a young woman named Ninlil through a side entrance, ducking under a reed mat curtain. She's already chewing something, her jaw working steadily, her expression serene. It's not food, you soon learn, but a thin sliver of tamarisk root, softened by a night of soaking in rose water. It serves as both breath freshener and brush. Men chew loud, she says, offering you a stick from the bowl. But women chew longer. You laugh? She doesn't. Mesopotamian humor isn't always obvious. In her courtyard, her mother is preparing a paste of finely crushed barley husks, ground fennel seeds, and a dab of goat milk, used not for eating, but as a sort of cosmetic gum polish. For important visits, she explains, dabbing it on her own teeth with a woven cloth strip. And sometimes for flirting. It smells slightly sweet, but the goat milk is pungent. The family's youngest daughter is given a much simpler option: a thin strip of cloth dipped in warm brine. She presses it gently along her gum line while reciting a nursery rhyme. You listen, catching the Mesopotamian rhythm. Gums like moonlight, teeth like stars. Wipe away the dust of words before the evening jars. It's oddly soothing, and you try not to get misty-eyed. Historians still debate the role of women in developing household hygiene routines. While men left records of temples and trade, most of what we know about daily cleanliness comes from indirect clues: scraps of recipes, annotated shopping lists, or fragments of oral poems like the one you just heard. And these women weren't just caretakers of hygiene, they were teachers. Ninlil shows you her tooth lesson tablet passed down by her grandmother. It's a small clay square etched with a step-by-step guide. Chew the root, rinse with date vinegar, never speak during cleaning. A warning follows. If your teeth rot, your words will rot too. You ask if it's a superstition. She shrugs. Teeth fall out. Words stay. In the city's wealthier quarter, you meet a merchant's wife whose dental care routine rivals modern spa rituals. She stores bundles of cinnamon bark in ceramic jars, grinds pearls into powder, and has a personal servant whose only job is to fan her while she scrapes her teeth with an ivory blade. You wonder aloud if it works. Of course not, she says breezily, but I look marvelous doing it. She gifts you a tiny linen pouch filled with powdered mint leaf and crushed pumice, for breath as clean as a priest's conscience. You thank her, but politely stash it in your bag. You've grown fond of fig twigs by now. As dusk settles, you spend time in a communal courtyard where women of all ages gather for what can only be described as a hygiene circle. There's chatter, laughter, passing of root bundles, and occasional spitting into decorative bowls. One elderly woman boasts she still has all her teeth, even the cranky ones. She credits her long dental life to a rather unconventional method, sleeping with her head tilted so saliva drains properly. You laugh now, she says, wagging a finger, but it's kept my molars anchored longer than my last 2 husbands. You note it down for science. A nearby midwife tells you of a birth ritual involving newborn gums. We rub a drop of sesame oil across the gums and whisper the child's true name. That way, when the teeth grow in, they'll know how to speak kindly. You ask if that always works. She snorts. You've met children. At night, back in Nenlil's courtyard, the family performs their evening prayers. Before the chants begin, each woman quietly chews her root, rinses with warm date water, and wipes her teeth clean with cloths soaked in lavender oil. It's not just hygiene, it's intention, a signal that the day's noise is done, and now the voice belongs to silence. A shooting star streaks overhead as Ninlil's grandmother hums something too old for you to understand. But it's comforting all the same. You lie back on your woven mat, fig root tucked beneath your pillow, just in case, and think about how something as simple as cleaning your teeth could be so layered with care, belief, and sisterhood. These rituals, passed from mother to daughter, weren't written in the grand annals of kings. They didn't appear on tablets heralding victory or flood, but they endured quietly, daily, shaping generations with each gentle scrape of root against tooth. You close your eyes, wondering if your own routines might be remembered one day as sacred. Morning again, but this time your bones ache a little less. Maybe it's the fig twig, maybe it's the lavender rinse, maybe it's just settling into Mesopotamia's slow rhythm. Either way, your guide is back, dragging you toward a new curiosity. What the ancients thought about bad breath. Yes, halitosis, the ancient scourge. Even in the land of ziggurats and moon gods, stinky breath had consequences. You're led into the quarter of the scribes, where clay dust hangs in the air like a fine mist, and words are sacred currency. Here, the mouth matters, not just for eating or chanting prayers, but for speaking spells, reciting contracts, and whispering to gods. And if your breath smells like boiled onions and old goat, forget it. Your words won't carry. One scribe, eyes bleary from a night of inscription, confides in you. We chew cardamom before dawn, not just for the scent, but so our words land sweeter. You're offered a blackened pod. It's bitter at first, like licking an incense stick. But then a slow burn of warmth blooms on your tongue. You catch yourself smiling, even if your teeth are gritty with clay dust. Down the alley, an herbalist displays jars of ancient cures on reed mats. Myrrh resin, frankincense bark, sour tamarind paste, and something called smile stone, a nugget of volcanic glass people once believed absorbed oral odors. Place it under your tongue, she says, or tape it to your throat. Either works. You decide against it, but you buy the tamarind paste. Historians still argue whether these breath-freshening practices were medicinal, magical, or just polite. Some tablets treat them as daily necessity. Others link them to spirit-cleansing rituals. What's clear is that smelling bad, especially from the mouth, could signal not just poor hygiene, but moral decay. In fact, one clay tablet describes a villain not by his crimes, but by the way his tongue stank of dried locust. It's poetic, in a deeply rude way. The local temple singers are even more obsessed with mouth care. A priestess lets you observe her preparation ritual, brushing her teeth with a mix of honey and finely ground shell, rinsing with mint steeped in cold river water, and finally placing a bead of amber beneath her tongue while chanting. The gods don't listen to sour breath, she tells you. You whisper something sarcastic. She doesn't laugh. As you follow her into the temple's echoing interior, the air smells of sandalwood and crushed pine needles. The singers line up in rows, each with their own mouth ritual. Some with rose oil gargles, others chewing cedar bark. One singer even snorts powdered cinnamon, insisting it keeps her nasal passages clear, and breath as divine as Inanna's sigh. You cough. She smiles triumphantly. A visiting merchant from Dilmun, present-day Bahrain, brags that their breath recipes are the best in the region. We use dried citrus peels and sea salt. The salt scrapes, the peel charms. He gives you a chunk to try. It's like biting into a sun-baked lemon rind, but oddly satisfying. As you meander through markets and courtyards, it becomes clear that breath wasn't just a health concern. It was a social signal. Fresh breath meant status, control, closeness. One potter you meet explains that he checks his breath each morning before approaching customers. You don't sell a jar with a dragon's mouth, he says, exhaling dramatically. A sharp-nosed customer nearby snorts in agreement. Back in the communal bathhouse, a gaggle of young men are performing what can only be described as a grooming relay. One scrapes his tongue with a fishbone comb. Another pops sesame seeds in his mouth, letting the oil slick his teeth. A third blows through a clay reed, expelling whatever fumes he's just rinsed with. Some fermented herb mix that smells like garden compost and regret. They offer you a turn. You decline, firmly. But not all ancient remedies were grim. One young boy shows you a toy, a small carved pig whose mouth opens and closes. Inside, a waxy balm sits in the hollow. It's for smearing on your teeth, he says proudly, so girls think you have magic breath. You can't help but laugh. He beams. As dusk approaches, you meet a storyteller, an old man with only 4 teeth, but a voice that wraps around your ribs like a warm scar. He insists breath doesn't come from the mouth, but the heart. A kind soul sweetens the air, he says, even if your teeth are gone. You try asking whether he still practices any mouth cleaning routine. He winks. Only when I court a widow. And then he launches into a story about a woman who made her lover chew licorice root for a full moon cycle before allowing him to kiss her hand. By the end, he says, his breath was divine, but he hated licorice forever. You sit with him until stars litter the sky like scattered salt. The city breathes slower now, its people having done their rituals, chewed their roots, rinsed their words. You wonder if one day some future listener might lean closer to a screen or speaker and smile at the thought of ancient Mesopotamians chewing cinnamon bark just to compliment a neighbor without offense. Maybe bad breath is the great historical equalizer. You lie back, lips still tingling faintly from tamarind and cardamom, and drift toward dreams of laughing priestesses, whispering scribes, and the eternal search for breath sweet enough to charm the gods. You wake before dawn, wrapped in the scent of last night's cardamom. The city is quiet, almost reverent, as you rise and stretch beside the reeds. There's a coolness in the air, a pause before the furnace of the sun takes over. And today, your guide whispers, you're finally going to meet the elite, the physicians, not the herbalists, not the wise grandmothers, not even the temple priests who dabble in dream diagnosis, but the trained medical professionals of ancient Mesopotamia, whose knowledge was etched in cuneiform and guarded like treasure. If you want to understand oral hygiene from the top down, this is where the incense-scented scroll meets the gum line. You follow a narrow corridor into the physician's courtyard, where papyrus plants sway in ceramic jugs, and two apprentices are grinding something gritty in a stone bowl. Crushed date pits, one mutters, for tooth powder. You peer closer. Tiny shards, sharp and beige, like the world's most aggressive toothpaste. The chief physician emerges in a robe embroidered with fish and stars. You wonder if the stars mean dental specialty. He gestures for you to sit while he opens a clay box. Inside are bundles of chewed twigs, slices of aromatic bark, and little cakes of something grayish-green. Toothstones, he calls them, for rubbing. You grind it with spit. You stare. He doesn't blink. The rubbing begins, and it's, well, effective. Your teeth feel polished, but also slightly under attack, like they've been buffed with volcanic ash, which, come to think of it, they probably have. Later, the physician explains that tooth care was not only a personal concern, but a cosmological one. The Sumerians believed that illness, including toothaches, could stem from spiritual imbalance. A demon of the mouth, he intones solemnly, can nest in an unbrushed molar. He says this while waggling a stick at your lower jaw. Historians still argue whether these demons were metaphorical or a proto-scientific attempt to explain bacteria. Some translations suggest they were imagined as tiny worm-like spirits that bored into teeth. Others claim they were part of a broader system of bodily humors and lunar cycles. Either way, you're not taking chances. You're handed a recipe: equal parts crushed garlic, beer foam, and powdered fish bones. Spit and swish, says the assistant cheerfully, or swallow it if you're brave. You are not brave. The assistant shrugs. Suit yourself? Clears the throat, too. Next, you observe a treatment session. A clay tablet patient record is laid out, etched in precise wedge marks. The complaint? Tooth that pulses like the moon. The cure? A poultice of fig sap and warm milk packed onto the gums and tied in place with a strand of linen. The physician warns the patient not to speak for 3 hours. The gods hate wasted breath, he says. You can't tell if that's medical advice or a personality quirk. Still, you try the sap and milk trick. It's oddly comforting, sweet, gooey, kind of like coating your gums in fig pudding. You mumble a thanks, and the physician grins. He leads you to a small shrine in the corner of the compound. A statue of Gula, the goddess of healing, stands beside a lion. Offerings of fresh mint, polished stones, and dried lizard tails lie in baskets at her feet. We place our toothbrushes here, says the physician, motioning to a reed mat stacked with chewed twigs. She guards the mouths of the righteous. You can't help but chuckle. So she's the patron saint of clean breath? The physician squints at you. She also flays liars. Fair enough. As the sun reaches its peak, you're invited to observe a medical class. Young students recite memorized incantations, blending tooth care with prayer. Let the rot retreat. Let the sweetness return. Let no tooth be abandoned. You're told this phrase is repeated every time someone carves a new tooth twig. You borrow a stylus and etch it into a scrap of clay. Your handwriting is awful, but it's yours. The teacher, a stern woman with a voice like distant thunder, lectures on the properties of salt and vinegar as cleansing agents. Salt kills worms, she says. Vinegar invites the spirits out. She passes around a jar of pickled onion skins. For soaking, she adds, not for snacking. You sniff it anyway. Big mistake. By evening, you're allowed into the record hall, an archive of clay tablets documenting centuries of mouth-related maladies. There are entries on gums that bleed like rain, teeth that ache in dreams, and even one titled, When the Breath Carries Sadness. The final tablet you're shown features a smiling face carved beside a list of herbs. The title translates roughly to Victory of the Mouth. You grin at that. A good mouth day, immortalized in clay. You exit the physician's compound a little wiser, a little mintier, and more than a little exhausted. Your tongue tastes of salt, honey, fishbone, and pride. You've seen what passed for dental surgery, herbal science, spiritual healing, and even ancient toothpaste branding. And you can't help but wonder, how many generations, how many little clay tablets, and how many fig twigs it took to go from these simple rituals to today's sterile, minty world of modern dentistry. But maybe, just maybe, Something was lost along the way. Maybe we traded fig sap and whispered blessings for fluoride and blue LED lights. Maybe not everything should be antiseptic. Maybe there's still something sacred in the small, quiet acts of self-care. The night settles softly over the ziggurats, wrapping each rooftop in shadows and hush. The stars blink lazily in the Mesopotamian sky, just as they did thousands of years ago, when someone, perhaps not so different from you, tilted their head to gargle with river water under a waning moon. You lie back on a woven mat, fig twig resting beside you, your mouth still tingling with the ghosts of mint, salt, and tamarind. Somewhere beyond the city walls, a reed flute hums a sleepy melody. A breeze rustles the papyrus, gentle as a whispered joke. The lessons of the day begin to blur. The laughter of the bathhouse boys, the solemn warning of the priestess, the scribes chewing cardamom to sweeten their oaths. Even the gruff physician, with his jars of powdered fish bones, seems softer now, like a half-remembered dream fading into twilight. Your body sinks, breath by breath, into stillness. You are no longer a visitor here, but a thread in the tapestry, woven gently between myth and memory, science and superstition, soap and spell. And as the wind shifts across the ancient courtyards and dust settles between the bricks, you know one thing for certain. The people of this strange, brilliant world cared about their mouths. They cared enough to chew, to rinse and to pray, to joke. They cared enough to pass it on. Sleep now with the taste of history still warm on your tongue. End of script. Sweet dreams.